Continuing part 2 of chapter 3 with John Jeckovich. It's June 24th, 2024, and this chapter is entitled, You're in the Army, and this time Mr. Jeckovich was just transferred to Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas for training. So I'm going to continue reading. It's about the first time Mr. Jeckovich rode a horse. That is after I got over the apprehension of this large horse I was riding. All in all, I enjoyed my short stay at Fort Sam Houston. My only regret was that I did not have any emotional or social maturity to enjoy it to the fullest. One day after coming from the drill field, where did this come from?
Bottled water.
You poured it in there?
Mm-hmm.
Can't get any vitamin water?
I'll get some in a little as soon as I clear out.
Everyone again thought it was Lachlan. The rumor was to be squelched following day when we arrived at our new destination. That night, I was lying in my bunk and I thought about the events that had happened to me in my 3 months in the Army. How I had first thought about home and how apprehensive I felt about leaving. I was naive enough to think that was indispensable and they could not do it without me. I was wrong. They were doing just fine according to my last phone conversation with them. They were in a state, then my stay at Upton, hopefully for all good breaks that I thought I deserved. There was another illusion. I said I soon got rid of it. The Army did not owe me anything. If I got through everything ahead of me, I would consider myself fortunately. I knew in my gut that I was not going to Lachlan. It was not going to be in the Air Corps. It was not something going to be fly bombers or even drop the bombs from them. I did not reach what fate had in store for me, but I was prepared to meet it head on. My short stay at Fort Sam Houston and the visits to San Antonio afforded me calmness and tranquility I never experienced before. I never knew that there were places such as this. The beauty and the majesty of all the overwhelmed me. I vowed to return there one day and relive it once again.
You never visited Snake Hill?
Did you ever go back to San Antonio after you're out of service?
No.
Do you regret that?
Huh?
You didn't want to go back?
You ever go back to Snake Hill,
No.
Texas? Oh, where all the Mexicans lived?
Would you ever wanted to move to San Antonio?
Huh?
Would you ever wanted to move to San Antonio?
No. Would I move to San Antonio? No.
No. The next morning, we boarded the trucks after breakfast. Half of the people involved in the move thought we're heading for Lachlan, and the other half, just as certain, thought we'd wind up somewhere else. I tended to agree with the latter, and that they would soon wind up somewhere else. I tended to agree with the latter, and they would soon be aware of our new destination. So they put you in those trucks at San Antonio, and one group thought they're going to Lachlan, another group didn't know where they're going.
The street signs.
Couldn't someone have asked?
Pardon?
If someone asked, couldn't you found out where you're going?
No. Well, they tried to find out.
But they didn't find out, did they?
No.
Where'd you end
They said in
up?
the back of the truck it was covered.
Where'd you end up going?
Huh?
Where'd you end up going?
Well, it wound up in Breckenridge.
Okay. As it turned out, we veered northerly westerly direction, Lakeland was out of the picture. We had traveled about 30 minutes at most when we approached an Army installation. Appearing on a large sign in green and brown letters were the words, "Welcome to Camp Bullis. Welcome to Camp Bullis." As we entered the camp, we were abruptly awakened by the stark difference of this camp from the one we had just left. The first item that almost leaped right out at us was the enormous amount of clay all over the campgrounds. It was underfoot, in the roadways, on the person of everyone we saw walking about. The camp was strikingly GI, with two-story barracks all laid out in a neat rows, and its profusion of troops marching about in tight formation. Camp Bullis was located 20 miles northwest of San Antonio on the Leon Springs Military Reservation. It was a sub-post of Fort Sam Houston, established in 1917 as a target range and a maneuver ground for the fort. The 2nd, 88th, and 95th Infantry Divisions made extensive use of the camp during World War II. It was reverted to an inactive status on January 1, 1950. Later utilized as a training center for 4,500 reserves and National Guard troops. The trucks took us past the post theater where we imagined we would be processed. This was the first time I had the opportunity to see so many military officers. They looked very efficient and quite professional in their starch fatigues and their ranks on their collar lapels, and their last names printed on their helmet liners, which they all wore at the same precise angle. I was assigned to C Company, which I later found out was a basic rifle company. All the people I had come down with scattered throughout the complex of the companies and regiments. There was no one I knew assigned to C Company with me. A Second Lieutenant Jason and Staff Sergeant Adolsky drove me to my company area. They were both cordial, and I felt that they were attempting to make me feel at ease as much as they possibly could under the circumstances. As we reached the company area, I noticed that there were large numbers of men with their fatigues jackets on. They appeared to be cleaning their rifles and small arms. I was told by the Lieutenant Jason that they were called armaments stables, cleaning and checking equipment and individual arms. Sergeant Adolowski ushered me into one of the barracks, walked halfway down its length, and stopped at one of the bunks. "This will be my bunk, an upper one." I also had a small coat rack and a small shelf behind the bunk, and a floor-foot locker stored in the front of my bunk. I was told to store my equipment and then join the rest of the company outside. I felt apprehensive. It was also strange to me, and besides, I did not have insurance of familiar faces, which I've gotten used to at Fort Sam Houston. I joined the rest of the company in the armament stable. I picked up bits and pieces related to the information of my weapon. We were part of the 95th Infantry Division, activated about a year ago, and they were getting us full strength. They all had completed their basic training with the division. They're expecting to be shipping out for overseas duty within the month. We were the replacements to fill their table of organization, TO, and once completed, they would be ready for overseas duty. They were all hoping to go to the European Theater of Operations, ETO, rather than the Pacific. I concurred with that thought. Military life as such was much different from anything I've ever experienced so far. In the Army, reveille was at 500 hours and breakfast was at 600 hours. The rest of the day was filled out with 15-mile hikes, field problems, night problems, lectures, rifle range shooting, and physical training. Retreat was 1,700 hours and lights out at 2,300 hours, which I welcomed wholeheartedly. The non-coms and officers were all dedicated leaders, and I thought highly of them. I soon developed a kinship toward them, and I believe I was fortunate to go overseas with such an outstanding group. At this point, after being only a relatively short on time, I began to evaluate my emotions regarding rejection at Lakeland. I truly resolved my situation and determined to make the best of it. Then suddenly one afternoon we're completing in a field program.
It's
Minutes?
Sunday. No mail.
I know, minutes?
17.
Oh, geez, yeah. I don't know if I can make it. I discovered my name on a shipping list for the next day. There are only 3 of us on the list and 2 others of myself. The only 2 were from the 3rd platoon, and I did not know them very well. After chow that evening, I began to feel downhearted and depressed. I had felt better if there had been a mass movement, a great number of people with me, but 3 people was disheartening. I felt inferior and inadequate that I could not make this team. As we boarded the trucks the next morning, there was no feeling of anticipation of something great happening. Instead, there was only a dull sensation in the pit of my stomach. In one small step, it became a full, in one small section. Our convoy consisted of 3 trucks, 2 additional ones we picked up on our way out of camp. There were 4 other companies, and in total, there must have been 40 or 50 personnel in this move. As we took State Highway 46 to get on the main highway, Highway 35, I tried to keep track of my directions. We passed the first highway marker indicating that we're on 35. I surmised correctly that they were heading north. This is a longer trip than the previous one to Bullis. As several hours passed, we have already had 2 short breaks. The break would consist of a truck convoy pulling off to the shoulder road. The troops would dismount, stretch their legs, relieve themselves, have a smoke, if they so inclined. I did the former too, but not the latter. After riding for another hour, our latest break, we were approaching what to be an army installation. One could observe the telltale signs of a company nearby. There were large restricted area signs profusely side of the road, and invariably the barbed wire fences started to sprout up everywhere, giving an illusion of entering a prison camp. Shortly,
PW camp.
huh?
PW camp.
Yeah. Shortly thereafter, we approached the main gate of the camp with the armed sentry on duty. The sign at the entrance gate read, Camp Swift, home of the 106th Infantry Division.
The list got shot up. Whoa.
This is the division that was destined to lose 7,000 men captured and 800 men killed in the Battle of the Ardennes, commonly known as the Battle of Bulge. So the 106th Infantry Division took the biggest hit.
Yeah, they were all new. They were all untrained. Officers were terrible. Leadership was lousy. They didn't have much background.
7,000 of them were captured.
Yeah.
Where would the Germans put 7,000 soldiers?
Germans?
Yeah, they said 7,000 soldiers were captured. Where would the Germans put 7,000 soldiers?
Where were the Germans?
Put them. The Germans captured 7,000 of these guys. Where would the Germans put 7,000 American prisoners?
Put it in the PW camp.
How would you feed 7,000 people?
Well, you feed an army, you could feed 7,000 people.
Yeah, but the Germans were running out of food.
Huh?
The German troops were running out of food.
They couldn't do that. They wouldn't last long.
The 106th had been activated in early spring of 1943 and was full strength and well trained. Then some unexplained reason, some 7,000 enlisted men were pulled out of ranks, taking their place and arriving only a short time after the division embarked their 1,200 men from ASTP, with 1,100 men from training as air cadets and 1,500 from the divisions not yet scheduled for overseas, and 2,500 from various disbanded small units, mostly service troops. Like many other infantry divisions, it had been rated for replacement to fill units' position. Like the former Camp Bullis, this was a typical infantry training center with a stark row of two-story barracks lined up so many centuries was a bleak reminder of its real presence and purpose. Minutes? What should I have to do after this reading? I have to play back the one from yesterday.
11 minutes.
Play back the one from yesterday, all right? This was a serious business. Everything about it, from its monastery-like surroundings to the professionalism of its people, excluded one role: to be proficient in killing the enemy. I was assigned to A Company, 424th Infantry Regiment. Most of the men in the company were replacements as were fairly new to the infantry. Some had 6 to 8 months in training air cadets. These were the most bitter and frustrated. All were transferred from ASTP programs, and a few were from detached units, as was I. The efficiency and experience of this division was most certainly downgraded because of the large influx of ill-qualified enlisted men. It did not compare to the spit and polishing of the infantry division I had just left at Bullis. The officers of non-com cadre were the most part experienced in their assigned duties, but none of them have seen real combat. I felt reluctant to go overseas with them and wish that I remained at Camp Bullis. So you like Camp Bullis the best then, right?
Right?
You liked Camp Bullis the best so far.
Well, I mean, those guys just come off of maneuvers. They were over in Mississippi for 2 months. Maneuvers.
We were in a 10-truck convoy heading north. Most of the men in my truck were catnapping or reading a paperback book, which were 2 of the most popular pastimes. I had started to read, but my thoughts started to drift towards home. I wondered what was going on there, and it all seemed strange. There would be no duties. I received only 2 letters since I had been in the Army. This one mostly due to greatly to my constant moving about. I felt sure that I would receive a batch of old mail, and soon I got settled permanently. I felt eerie as I bumped along in an Army 6x6. As I thought about home, my old friend, the furnace, the woodpile in the basement, or even Mother's voice, irritated about something or someone. It all seemed insignificant now, and at one time I preoccupied most of my waking thoughts. I vowed sitting in the back of the truck that I would not return home and go back to the same situation that I had left. Minutes?
Eight.
Could you give me that vitamin water?
I will, yeah.
After about a 6-hour ride, we arrived at our destination A. As we entered the main gate, the sign overhead read, Fort Hood, TD Country. Fort Hood was located approximately 100 miles north of Camp Swift, between Killeen and Gatesville in Bell County. It was activated September 18, 1942, principally a tank destroyer unit, although many branches of the Army trained there. It was still an active post. After usual processing formalities, I was assigned to a field archery battalion. As I talked to the first sergeant about my building arrangements, he cautioned me not to get too comfortable, as I'd be here for only a short period, then sent to a cold shiver down my back. What next? Fort Hood was a large camp, troop capacity of 90,000 men. Now that's a big camp. 90,000 men. Wow. Wow. It was the usual Army camp I had become accustomed to. Instead of a training with personal weapons such as rifles, carbines, and pistols, I was now getting acquainted with large 105s and 155 howitzers. The man in the battery had been with the division since 1942. I believe in my battery that I had been with the division since 1942. I believe this was also true for the entire division. There was none of the Air Corps or ASTP personnel were so prevalent at Swift. The troops were similar to the men at Bullis, professional and efficient, and all instilling awareness of comradeship and loyalty to one another. They had trained as a unit and ended up going overseas. They felt a sort of closeness with one another. I'm gonna fall asleep, man.
5 minutes.
The days slid into weeks, and I was no further enlightened as what the Army was going to do with me than when I came here several weeks ago. I was going through the motions of my duties, mainly cleaning and performing maintenance on huge guns under supervision of platoon sergeants, and generally accomplishing what was expected of me. There was one unwritten rule in the Army. You do not want to get a reputation as a foul-up or a goof-off, which meant you do not want to foul up and goof off, as it would behound you the entire tour in the Army. I believe I had no worries of this scare. We just completed an all-day fields program. Shortly after the retreat, we were free until lights out, 2,300 hours. I became acquainted with most men in my platoon and could speak with them on a first-name basis. My problem was the situation, as most of them had paired off into groups of 2s and 3s long before I arrived on the scene. In other words, they had known for one another for a longer period of time and had solidified their relationship, as there were no one in my same circumstance, someone who had come into the outfit the same time I had. I was left to fend for myself. I would most likely go to Post Theater or the PX and have a Coke or listen to Mexican and country music. On occasions, I would saunter into the day room and write a letter to Mother. My mail was not caught up to me yet, but my mail going out was being delivered at home on a regular basis. I must have seemed strange to my mother and sister to receive my letters with no direct reply regarding questions we have previously asked. My second phone call clarified some of the questions, but since we had only a 3-minute time limit, there was much that was not said or talked about.
What was the time limit?
3 minutes.
Oh,
You'd only call home for 3 minutes. And then would the phone shut off? After the 3 minutes, would the phone shut off?
what?
When you're on the phone for 3 minutes, that was your time limit. If you tried to go longer, would the phone shut off?
Yeah.
Minutes?
2.
Then you could put the other one back in the beginning.
Yeah, I'm gonna put this in and then just wait a minute.
Yeah. I finally got my shipping orders. It had been 4 weeks to the day, and there was no one from the battery on it. But I was told that there would be 200 men shipping out with me from the entire battery. We were transported on a camp train the following day, which suggested to me we would take a longer trip than the previous moves. I hope that it was not cross-country and finally to the Pacific. As we boarded the troops train, I noticed there was a sleeper, suggesting that we're due for a trip, several days or more. Wow.
Right.
You got on the train, and there was a sleeping areas, so you must have been going to go on this train for a long time.
Yeah.
As usual, I did not know anyone in the sleeper area, as I did not feel up to conversing with anyone. The motion of the train put me to sleep. After a short interval, I was awakened abruptly by the sudden jarring of the train, and just in time for chow. I had never eaten on a moving train. How was it eating on a moving train?
Well, I mean, the train was steady. I mean, that's a big thing. That's a big machine there.
It was a pleasurable experience. Some of the men were talking about where we're going, and the general consensus was they were heading west to the Pacific. Everyone thought they were going to the Pacific when he got on that train.
Yeah. They're guessing. They're guessing.
30 seconds.
I did not general consensus that we were heading west to the Pacific. I did not know what it was, but I had an impression from the direction we're traveling that it was northeast and not the Pacific. Naturally, I did not rely on my assumptions to anyone, but just listen and said a few words now and then to be a part of the general conversation. Okay, we'll end this chapter right now.